If you ever played the original World of Warcraft and you meet people who also did that, everyone has their own stories. Everyone has something to tell about their great memories of this original World of Warcraft. Sure, the expansion packs also have their own memories for players, but every time people used to tend to go back to the original World of Warcraft and start sharing memories from there. That means that the original World of Warcraft definitely left some memories or left an impact for the ones who played it. And why is that? Well, we're going to talk about that later. First of all, the ones who maybe missed BlizzCon, Blizzard announced the World of Warcraft Legacy servers are coming back. Yes, the original World of Warcraft is going to be playable again, and how is that going to work? Well, that's something we're going to discuss later, and in this video we are going to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly about World of Warcraft Legacy servers. So this video actually contains only two subjects. First the good, and the second is going to be the bad and the ugly at the same time, because I think they're pretty much the same category, so it's just pretty much for the fun title, the good, the bad and the ugly. Alright, on the background you can see some footage from the old world, the previous, the first World of Warcraft, I mean, without any expansions, the legacy servers. And yeah, I actually went back to the game. I paid another 13 euros for 1 month so I could visit the old regions back. And I'm going to start with saying my personal experiences in this the good section. So yeah, a little bit of my own experience and a little bit of my own stories before I start with the good things. So I've been playing video games for more than 25 years now, and sometimes it happens that a video game reaches exceptional levels of quality. I can easily say that World of Warcraft is one of my top 10 games ever made, and yeah, it definitely deserves its place. But my personal story, what have I experienced with World of Warcraft? Well, if I have to summarize it, this was what a regular week for me looked back then. Monday evening, Molten Core, and that would be just right after dinner, starting with the raid, ending somewhere in the evening, 10 or 11 o'clock. Then Wednesday, it was Blackwing Lair days, also starting just right after dinner, you know, ending also really late, 11 o'clock or something. And then every Sunday, you know, I was with friends, and then they also played World of Warcraft, and we were saying like 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening, okay, I have to go home now because I have to eat, and then we need to do an Nixia raid. That meant that World of Warcraft literally was part of my life back then. I really was a hardcore player, I could say that. Later also the new raids Ankarai and Next Ramets were introduced, but we did a little bit of that, but we were a little bit late with that as well, because a couple of months later World of Warcraft Burning Crusade, the first expansion pack, was released, and for me that pretty much killed the legacy vibe. It was still a great expansion, you know, for the content and all, and it's had its own atmosphere, but for me there, I personally think World of Warcraft died for me, at least the hardcore playability of World of Warcraft for me. I stopped raiding and started to play it more casually. So back then I was also in a guild, and the fun thing is it was only a Dutch guild, and maybe you know a little bit of the Netherlands, but it's not a big country. So what we did was, I think 2 times we had a meeting, we had you know, we had a fun meeting up with each other, and it was really nice seeing everyone in real life. It turned out to be that some guys in the guild were living only like 10 kilometers, which is, I don't know, 7 miles or something, away from me, so it was really fun seeing everyone. And also I have to admit something, I really hope that doesn't really sound pathetic or something, but I've once met a girl in World of Warcraft. We had pretty fun, and I really don't hope some of my ex-girlfriends are watching, but she was actually the only girl ever I maybe think where I fell in love with. Maybe it was my age back then. I was a little bit naive, maybe, if I think about it afterwards. But you know, I asked her number, so we started texting. Later we started calling each other, And we also met once. That was a really fun day, really long, fun day. But yeah, eventually she wasn't really in love with me. So yeah, that really hurted me if you're in love. And I have to say, that was actually the only time ever I've felt, I think, true love. And that sounds like a sad story, but in fact, it's the truth. I can't really deny it. And again, I really don't hope any ex-girlfriends are watching. So yeah, for me, many reasons why the original World of Warcraft has a very special place in my life. Maybe it took really much time, and yeah, I really cherish the days back then. So as an addition to my personal story, let's continue with the good. So I've put the good old days in the text because, in my opinion, that still is the fact about the legacy World of Warcraft, the legacy servers. The beginning, for me, that is the good old days. And there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, let's look at the technical side of World of Warcraft. It was released around 2005, and back then, you know, the graphics were okay in compared with AAA games. So if you could compare that with a massive multiplayer online game, then yeah, you could have 2,000 players in the same world simultaneously and still being able to enjoy the wonderful world, which was very versatile. And yeah, you know, that's something World of Warcraft did really well. And even, you know, sometimes you got some disconnects when there was a new patch or a new server restart, you had some queues, but overall, you rarely would get a disconnect. That was something Blizzard did really well, server maintenance, and yeah, you had to pay 13 euros for that. That's a little bit of a downside for World of Warcraft, subscription based, but nowadays they fixed that a little bit with you're being able to pay online gold. That's so that's a little bit different now than from then. But yeah, technically wise, for me everything worked very well always, and it was a really fun, good experience without having many disconnects. You know, I barely got a disconnect, so that's really great. Another thing back then was the scale of the world. The world felt huge, insanely huge, and for that it had a kind of like mysterious atmosphere around it. And because, you know, you had really truly had the feeling that you could not get everywhere. I mean, there were mountains, there were higher areas, areas where you just could not get, and sometimes people were able to use specific tricks to get there, and that felt really special about the world. I mean, nowadays everyone got flying mounts, but back then you had to wait 40 freaking levels until you got your first mount, which had only 60% speed or something, and then only at level 60, which was something that took insanely long back then, you would be able to get your epic mount for 100% speed. But yeah, for that it costed 1,000 gold, and only some classes were able to do a quest for that epic mount, so they could save some money. But it was really most of the time just walking, you know, and that's something which makes the world even more larger and more epic. Like, you know, you had to truly had the feeling that you could not reach everywhere, and the world just felt very mysterious, and that atmosphere is something I will never forget about the original World of Warcraft. Also, something which the original World of Warcraft stood out against the other expansion packs for me personally was the end content, the end game content. When you reached level 60, actually from there the game got a second life, and that's where you had to start the very large raids with 40 men sometimes in cases with Onyxia, Multicore, Blackwing, Nexramas and Anchorai, 40 men. And that sounds like a lot, and it actually was. But our guild, I can remember back then, had such a large amount of numbers that only the top players could go with the main the main group towards the raid groups. And yeah, for that, long raids with 40 men, but it was sure epic as hell, you know. It was amazing to be in one of those raids, and also the gear was something very special. I mean, Tier 1 and Tier 2 absolutely were insanely well looking, and you truly had an epic feeling when you got that gear. Especially, you know, if you were on that level of the end game and you would just do a random 5-man dungeon, people would actually look towards you saying, wow, you got tier 1 or tier 2 gear, you know, because that's something that's impossible to get when you are not in a raid group with 40 men. I mean, 40 men is just insane if you compare it with nowadays. Another thing people sometimes tend to forget is that Horde and Alliance back in the vanilla days were truly unique. An example, paladins and shamans were only available for specific races. An example, I know paladins were only for humans and dwarves, but nowadays a lot of races can play them. And for shamans also, I only thought it was Tauren and orcs. Not really sure about that because I never played Horde, but yeah, I mean, that really gave a unique feeling to each side. I mean, paladins were good with the blessings and shamans were good with their totems, and they could really make a difference at specific bosses. So it could be a big deal, you know, to have paladins or shamans at your side with their blessings or their totems, and that's also a pretty unique feeling. And I find it really a pity that that Horde got paladins for no good reason. I mean, the Blood Elf Paladin story was really weird for me. It was really a really stupid story. And also Draenei Shamans, yeah, not really story-wise a good thing, I think. Same with Dwarf Shamans, really weird. But yeah, I can understand Blizzard eventually wanted to have all classes at all sides. But back then, in the vanilla days, you truly were unique if you were Horde or Alliance with your specific classes. So, let's summarize it. Why should you care playing the legacy servers again when they are released? Well, let's start with nostalgia. Of course, if you ever had the honor of playing the legacy servers, of course I can understand the main reason why you want to go back is for nostalgia. But in my opinion, the end game is just something really unique compared with the expansion packs. The feeling which I had then at the end game is something I never got with any of the other expansions. I tried it a little bit in a Burning Crusade. Not really, I didn't really like it, and I have to say Wrath of the Lich King is the only expansion which gave me a little bit of the feeling back, but the Legacy World of Warcraft just cannot be beaten with the end content, and especially the end gear, you know, and the amount of time that you need to have to actually get the end gear and the effort from your raid members as well. That's something which really stood out against all the other expansion packs in my opinion. So yeah, that are my good things about the old Legacy World of Warcraft. The bad and the ugly. Why should you not care for returning to the Legacy servers? Well, let's start by saying that when you should return, the game is most likely not going to look as you have remembered your good old days back then. Especially, you know, with the graphics. I mean, the game is back from 2005. It dates back from all the way there, and that's almost 15 years later. I mean, yeah. It didn't really age well, especially if you look at the trees, you know, they're just really old models, just two textures inside of each other. And also the landscape, you know, maybe you can remember Westfall, that area, that it was so atmospheric, but if you go back there now, it's just one huge, ugly, open landscape without any decoration, or at least you have that feeling. And nowadays, you have a little bit of a feeling yourself that it's something that you could just create if you have a level editor or something, but the feeling is most likely not going to be the same as it was almost 15 years ago. Another thing is time. Maybe players who now play the newer parts of World of Warcraft, they don't have an idea how much time and effort things took back then in the old World of Warcraft. And I think most people who played it back then were perhaps teenagers, you know, people who went to school, maybe older people. But if I look at my own generation, back then I was, let me have a quick calculation, 2005, I was around 18 years old, 18, 19 years old. So I was one of those people who also went to school, and I think most of that generation now either has a job, has kids, you know, a wife, a house. They don't have the time anymore to do that, and that's something you gotta realize, you know. Back then, at school days, there was plenty of time, but now further, you know, you have more responsibilities, and if I'm speaking for myself, I don't want to have the lifestyle anymore that I had back then. You know, really dedicating my life almost to World of Warcraft, spending at least 4 days a week, every evening at the game, but sometimes just an entire week. And for me personally, that's not something I want to do again. You know, for nostalgia reasons, I'm probably going to like it, but yeah, it's the time everything took, the raids, you know, but also the grinding for Exalted Reputation. Sometimes it just took half a year to get an epic item. For that long you had to grind, and yeah, maybe the gameplay doesn't really fit the modern time anymore, and that's something you really should consider. Another thing I might not be sure about is how far they are going back into true legacy. I mean, are they going to continue using the newer looking for group system with cross realm? Because back then, when you wanted to do a 5-manner, you really had to go to the city, spam the general chat looking for people to do a 5-manner, you know. And yeah, I'm pretty concerned how far back they're going to be, because the best would be if they would leave the modern system for looking for groups. But yeah, then again, for the 40-man raids, I'm not really sure if it's still realistic to expect that you will get 40 men. I mean, most of the guilds I know from my old realm are pretty much either died out or they just accepted almost everyone, no raiding experience whatsoever. So it's going to take, I think, a lot of effort to create new hardcore guilds for people who want to do the hardcore raiding. And as I said before, I think most people who played it back then now have outgrown the game, and maybe the game has outgrown them, or at least outdated them with it's being such an old game. And the question is, do you really want to do this over again? I mean, if I have to jump to the conclusion, I think World of Warcraft Legacy was a great memory, and it should be that way. And it's a really fun thing that they have now resurrected Legacy servers. But yeah, first of all, I'm really curious how they are going to do it technically with the newer systems like looking for a group and all. And also, are they going to make grinding more easier? Because, you know, Exalted statuses back then took such an enormous amount of time and gold. And I'm not really sure if the people from then are willing to do that again, especially with the new things they have implemented in the later World of Warcraft expansions. So yeah, if I have to make a conclusion, I think the idea is great, and I think there are still a lot of people who are very interested in the end content of World of Warcraft. The legacy servers of World of Warcraft and the end content from that. But I think the time was nice back then, but it's not going to be the same experience now, almost 15 years later. And yeah, that's, you know, it's like an old book, and you should just leave it like that and not try to re-experience it, because you never get the same experience. But that's my conclusion. Please let me know what you think about the World of Warcraft Legacy servers. It's now been 2 weeks almost since Blizzard has announced it on Blizzcon, and let me know what you guys think of it. Are you going back to play it, or are you just like me, leaving it like an old memory? And yeah, just have it that way. So let me know that, and thank you guys for watching. Hope you liked this video, this special, and hopefully see you at the next video.